And welcome everyone for joining us today and giving up the time. We're really keen and excited to obviously discuss some of these crucial topics with you all that not only as businesses but individuals we need to be aware of in these current circumstances. For those who don't know me, my name's Annaliese, or Anna Skoien. I look after our human resources recruitment team at BLACKROC. Anyone that isn't aware of BLACKROC, we're a Brisbane-based recruitment firm. So not only do we specialise in HR, we also specialise in IT, technology, product, UX, UI, design, sales and marketing, accounting and finance, and in that executive search space across temporary, contract and permanent. Just before we get started, so obviously as you've all entered, you're all on mute anyway, which is great. So if we can keep it that way, that would be wonderful, just to minimise background noise disruption. As some of you already done, you do obviously, or if you do, have the ability to use a camera. Please feel free to turn it on, no judgment if you're in your pyjamas. We're really keen to see everyone and have you see each other and really connect. So do feel free to utilise that camera function if you have the ability. And just finally, as you've already started doing, there is the chat option down there. So as this session progresses through, if any questions pop to mind as Georgia is talking, feel free to pop them in there. I'll be filtering through that. We will aim to go through, answer those questions. If we don't get to them through the session, we'll definitely endeavour to get to them at the Q&A towards the end.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to have Georgia Henry, who's the founder of Henry Reid, join me once again. Georgia, or BLACKROC, were really fortunate enough to have Georgia join us for our first BLACKROC HR event back in February. The feedback we had on Georgia from attendees was exceptional, just from her wealth of knowledge, the passion that she demonstrates. I probably don't need to tell you all that because you'll get to see that today. So look, we're really grateful to have her join us and to share her expertise. So I will now hand to Georgia to introduce herself.
Thanks, and it was really exciting to be asked back. I had so much fun at the BLACKROC event that we did, and it's a shame that we can't do face-to-face events at the moment. But this is great because we can actually still interact with everyone. So as Anna said, I'm the founder of a company called Henry Reid, and we are specialists in organisation culture. So we work with organisations to assess their current culture, design an ideal culture for organisational effectiveness, and help implement those changes to evolve the culture to be able to support the achievement of strategic objectives and purpose, the company's purpose. So we found, my background is of more than 25 years in corporate HR and organisational development, working for multinational organisations as part of global teams, as well as running national functions, working for large family organisations, large national businesses, member-based companies. So I've got a real variety of different background in that corporate HR space. But what I've found is that really everything stems back to organisation culture and working independently rather than in an internal role, able to provide much greater insights into culture, have more robust, honest conversations with CEOs than I could ever have as an internal HR director. And we provide an unbiased and independent view of the reality of organisations, which gives executives and boards some clear information for decision making, and it really sets a business case for improving culture. So that's what we do. We've got a small team. We're based in Brisbane, but we work nationally with clients and hoping internationally as well. Now that we're breaking down all the barriers to work with everyone moving online as well.
Perfect. So yeah, look, Georgia has so much knowledge to share, and it was a no-brainer really to ask her to join me on this discussion about what we're kind of facing at the moment. So we do hope that you take a lot away from today. So as you would have seen through the invite and the communications, today's webinar is really around topics of how to continue business in this changed working environment. How do we prepare for the recovery when this does end, because it will end at some point? and how to use the disruption that we're currently experiencing to innovate and create value to our clients, whatever industry we're in, differently. So without further ado, we'll get into it. Georgia, I guess, firstly, what are you seeing as the impact on businesses, leaders, employees, you know, of the changes that we've all had to make really in this last month at the moment?
Yeah, well, the change is constant and daily. And I think I just wanted to say this at the start too, I certainly don't have all the answers. What I hope to do today is share some insights and give you some topics or points to start a conversation and be able to point you in the right direction. But for businesses in general, there's had to be a lot of change implemented quickly. And I think what businesses have realised is that can we just make sure the mics are on? Can we make sure the mics are on mute, please? So we just need to make sure that, businesses have had to implement change quickly. And I think what businesses have realised is that they weren't prepared for something like this. If they had business continuity planning, it probably wasn't effective or was out of date. They may have thought that they might have been ready to be able to implement significant change. But there's businesses that are having to transform and change really, really quickly. And what I say for businesses, and I'm seeing the leadership teams are meeting more regularly, meeting daily. They've got to be reaching out to their networks of external support and getting the expert advice, whether that's from employment lawyers or government agencies, comms and PR specialists, people like ourselves who can provide support. But it's really important at this time for businesses as they go through that reaction stage and that implementation of change stage to understand their organisation culture and the impact that's having on leaders and on employees through this process, because it is a roller coaster with lots of changing options. And when we have things like the Prime Minister telling us to hibernate business, that's not necessarily a great idea for all businesses. And I think it's actually a time for innovation and looking at adaptation and change rather than hibernation. For leaders, it's been incredibly tough, and I've been reaching out to a lot of my clients and to HR contacts as well, just to see how they're going, because leaders are bearing the brunt of this. You're making tough decisions. You're having to have conversations that you never thought with multiple employees. And you've got to change your ability to deliver work in the way that you've normally done things. So I think leaders are really challenged through this process. Maybe their leadership style is not effective in engaging and motivating people who aren't managing face to face. A lot of leaders have had the desire to do the same thing, but in a different environment. So let's keep trying to do what we've done before in the way we've done it, but we'll do it with people at home. That doesn't work either, because employees are facing an incredible amount of personal change and anxiety and uncertainty. And as we've seen by some of the comments in the chat, you've got conflicting priorities when you're suddenly working from homes with toddlers and kids and homeschooling or caring for parents. So the changes for businesses and leaders and employees are immense. And I think we need, in all of those scenarios, to be first and foremost coming from a position of care and empathy and understanding, and making sure we're asking the questions throughout the organisation, no matter what your position is, are you okay, first and foremost, and then working together to work through that and what you can do. And I think there's a lot of things that as leaders or as business owners or as HR professionals we can do. One thing is to communicate more and in different ways. So just a show of hands, who's absolutely been overwhelmed with Zoom meetings in their business over the last couple of weeks? There been lots of Zoom meetings? Quite a few, yep. So what we've found, and I've read lots of articles, I've even seen examples of a leader wanting to put in place an 8-hour Zoom meeting so he could make sure his employees were working from home. It's crazy stuff that's been happening, but the way to communicate is is often and in different methods and with understanding. So certainly you can have meetings, and I think face-to-face is really important when we've got people working remotely, is to have that sense of connection. But chat functions, so using Slack or on Teams, the chat functions, just to check in, picking up the phone. There's different ways to communicate, and I think it's really important to communicate what you do know, and rather than talk about the uncertainty of what we don't know. There's a lot we don't know right now, and people need to know what we do know and have some reassurance.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. Yeah, and 100% agree on that communication piece. It really is. It is key, and yeah, too much can be a little bit too much at times. But yeah, I think they're all really valid points that you've got there. I guess from an employee sort of perspective, Georgia,
Yep.
have you had sort of any feedback or seen anything in the market or heard anything in the market at the moment with how they're feeling and dealing with it?
Employees, I've been doing a lot more one-on-one coaching with leaders at the moment, because the leaders are needing to reach out and have someone outside their business to help them and understand. And what they're saying from their employees, around their employees, is that you know, some people are really engaged and want to continue working and see this as we're just business as usual. Others have just, you know, put down and walked away and said, I don't need to contribute or continue to work. And I think there's such a range of different perspectives from employees. And this is where, for me, organisation culture is so essential right now. So how you've been treating your employees, the culture that's created is going to make all the difference with how your employees contribute and innovate or communicate right now, when they are going through so much stuff personally. I saw I'm part of a couple of different Facebook business groups, and I saw one person talking about the JobKeeper allowance, saying that they'd spoken to all of their employees, saying, fantastic, there's the opportunity, we will qualify for the JobKeeper payment, assuming that all gets passed today through the government. And one of their employees had said, but I don't need to work, because she'd wanted them to start to contribute to some projects. And they said, well, I don't need to work to get the JobKeeper payment, so you can't make me work. That is a beautiful illustration of a bad culture in this time and place, where employees see this as a break or a time to put their feet up. What we really need to see in organisations, if there are cultures that are having this type of impact on employees, this is the time to change that. This is the time to reach out and engage your employees, to help them continue to add value, because adding value and feeling valued is really essential for employee well-being. So looking at the work people are doing, it may not necessarily be the work that they have done in the past, but looking at how you can still create a good sense of community and care, adding value and having meaningful work, problem solving, different groups and teams. So I think organisation structure in this type of environment right now has to change. A traditional hierarchy is not really effective when we've got a lot of people who are working remotely, and being able to give people tasks or problems to focus on, looking at the outcomes rather than the specific ways of doing things or dictating ways of doing things, helps form collaborative teams who can then start to work together. So the way of working needs to change. So I've heard lots of different stories about how employees are feeling, how they're reacting. And I think when we come back to looking at the success of this and the impact of this, it does come back to what has the culture of the business been prior to this. And if culture's not been strong and positive and engaging for employees, it's going to be really hard for organisations to pull together to prepare for recovery and to re-innovate. But this is the time now that organisations should be saying, what is it we want to be in the future, and how can we actually improve our culture and engage our employees to deliver that for us? Because if your organisation's not doing that right now, your competition probably is. So it's a time to really be looking at that.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. And look, Jonathan has actually just posted a really good question in the chat. In your experience, Georgia, have leaders been taking the time to know and understand the needs and capabilities of their people, or are they trying to keep the same processes, standards, and values that they were using previously?
It's a bit of a mixed bag when I've talked to clients, because they're different. Their situations are different. So I've got some clients who are able to continue, like in the manufacturing industry, very much business as usual, and only some people have gone off site. But it's a real opportunity for organisations to start to connect. I see what we've seen leaders doing is having to have a lot more of review of strategy, review of business direction to decide what they do next. So the approach, we've got some clients who've really identified this is the time for change. We've got change forced upon us right now. We are in the midst of a huge amount of change. So if we're actually not taking the time to look at aligning what we need to do or how we need to pivot our business with the way we do business, it's going to be really difficult to deliver through that change. So organisations that are reviewing strategy, reviewing strategic direction, and reviewing culture in terms of what is the way that we have done business in the past? What have been our roadblocks and challenges? What are the unwritten ground rules that have made us achieving results really difficult? Do we need those anymore? Let's break down some of those barriers to our success, or let's reimagine what we can do. So I think business approaches have really varied, but as Jonathan put up there in the chat, this is exactly the time to be looking at strategy and project requirements and what's worked, what hasn't worked, and what you can do to actually start to prepare for business recovery.
Yeah, perfect. And I guess then leading on, so those organisations, in your experience and just I guess from everything we know that's going on at the moment, that have had an increase in business or have had the need to hire new employees, how has that been possible in this changed environment? And I guess what should businesses be considering, especially when employees may be starting a new job remotely?
Yeah, and it's a big challenge, but it's not a new one either. It is a challenge for a lot of businesses, in the fact that some businesses are doing extremely well out of this and need to be hiring staff. And there's lots of examples of bulk hiring and different ways of reviewing online assessments and things. If you look at companies like Coles and Woolworths and into the health industry. So more personally, I've reached out and been speaking to my network, and earlier this week was speaking with someone in my network who's just started a senior HR role, started last Monday. So has gone through a recruitment process where some was face-to-face, some was automated and online, but having then to start a new job in a senior role from her home. And she shared that they did have about a 2-hour face-to-face meeting at the beginning of last week, and that was really to hand over hardware. So here's the stuff that you need. Now go and meet with your team. And I think some of the key takeaways that she said were really essential for her was the communication, particularly from her senior leader, to be doing meetings like this, introducing her to the team, getting her to feel connected. But there's a lot of challenges around this, in the fact that when you start a new job remotely, there's a lot of things that you miss out on. You don't get that feeling of the sense of the culture, and who do we know? Who do we ask for questions? How do we, what are the unwritten ground rules? The things that you can actually pick up by watching and observing in a workplace. You don't have that. So her story was that it's really important to connect face to face, to be able to encourage people to ask questions, so that people are provided with contact lists and who to go to, and have that regular check-in and support. And I think now more than ever, when we're looking at recruiting in an environment that becomes all online, we can still have the face-to-face Zoom meeting interviews, but I think more importantly than ever is going to become looking at psychometric assessments and emotional intelligence evaluations. How are these people going to cope working in environments or in teams remotely, which is quite different to working in a physical team and in a physical environment. So it's really essential, if that's part of the processes that your businesses need to go through, prepare processes, checklists to make sure that everyone that will have a touch point with that new employee, either as part of the recruitment process or the onboarding or induction, is aware and makes time to reach out and connect, and that new employee doesn't feel isolated, because you've still got to get them up to speed quickly and contributing and adding value. So I think there's a lot of that falls back to the culture of the organisation as well. How well has that been done in the past? And because it's even more reliant when you're recruiting remotely.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're the kinds of excuse me, conversations as well we've been having with businesses around that. We still have a need to recruit. There's projects still happening, but now we need to shift our focus to that remote, and just educating them that it is absolutely possible. So yeah, that was a great example of the connection that you've got anyway, that it definitely is successful and it can be done.
Yeah.
On that remote piece then, I guess it obviously appears, I think, from what we're hearing, that this work from home scenario may be in place for some time, maybe many months. And how do you think that everyone, or how should everyone be adjusting to working in isolation or away from their normal workplace?
It's, the adjustment is going to take some time. We're already a few weeks into this, and I think people are starting to get an understanding of what that adjustment means. I think one of the key things is to understand that everyone is going to react to this differently, and everyone is going to be able to cope differently. Has it hit everyone yet? Has everyone had that moment where it's actually hit you? For me, that was last Thursday. I had a complete moment of, oh my God, I'm sitting in my office on my own, and what does this actually look like? And this is the reality. So I think you've got to understand that we're all going to go through a roller coaster of emotions. It will become easier. And the main difference is this is being forced upon us. None of us were ready for this, and we haven't been able to prepare. And in a normal change process, we go on a bit of a journey, and it's around, you become aware of that need to change, and then you buy into the change, and you know what's going to happen next, and then you become skilled in the change, and then you can keep it going and make that normal. We haven't had that build up and that time that would normally come with remote workers. And last year I was at a culture summit in San Francisco, and we had a whole workshop on remote employees. This is nothing new. I was sitting next to a couple of people from Capital Bank in the US. They had 1,700 customer service employees around the States who were employed specifically to work from home. They were completely set up for it. They had rules and guidelines, and people were employed to do that. So it was very, very easy for them to be able to transition people because they had boundaries and guidelines. Most of us don't have that. So some of the things that I took from there was, communication. Obviously, that's the key. Don't underestimate the importance of regular communication, face-to-face communication, team communication, the chats, the formal and informal. But don't over-communicate to a point where people can't get their work done, where you're constantly in meetings. And I think it's about understanding what is appropriate communication and times when people can communicate. And I'm going to just share an example of I wanted to set up a Zoom meeting a week or two ago. I'm just sharing this. Bronwyn's part of my team. She's on the call today. And I said, can we have a Zoom meeting at 10 o'clock? And it's like, can we make it 11? Because Bronwyn's daughter had an online music lesson, and then had a preschool Zoom meeting to connect into. And these things are really, really important. So it's about understanding what's happening within your teams and what they can and can't do right now, and be empathetic and be flexible. I think that's a key. The other thing from working from home is around social inclusion and connectivity and maintaining a sense of community. For a lot of people, they haven't been in an environment where they've had to work from home before, and it can be if they're living alone or they're living, single parent, or having to make some major adjustments. It can be a really lonely time, and I think it's that sense of social inclusion is essential. Another learning was about fairness. How do we look at what's fair? Who's doing what within the business? And there are different rules that apply. The rule book's been thrown out the window. So it's about helping people understand that being fair and equitable doesn't necessarily mean that everything's the same, but you're looking at what you can do across businesses. For me, where there's always a breakdown is in the trust factor. So where we don't have a high level of trust, of leaders trusting employees, that the employees are actually doing the work, and employees trusting each other, that's when we start to have a breakdown. Again, that goes back to that sense of culture. And if employees can't be doing what they normally do, then looking at how they can continue to add value, or how you can add value to them. So through development, there is so much content online available at the moment for people to be able to access. And so if people aren't able to add value by doing their normal work or focusing on change and business strategy, help them to develop. So there's a whole lot of things there that need to be focused on as we settle into this for the next few months.
Yeah, perfect. And Jonathan's just actually asked another really good question, which kind of encapsulates sort of everything we've discussed at the moment. But are you finding that leaders are lost on how to build culture, integrate teams, and get through this current rocky phase, I guess? That looking at fear of redundancy is, it's constantly evolving situation. So can teams build a culture now if it hasn't been built well before this current environment that we're in?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is actually an ideal time, because everything's been turned upside down. Everything's just been broken. We've broken down a lot of the barriers that have been in place. The unwritten ground rules of the way we worked in an office environment or in a business environment have been thrown out the window. So sometimes you can break things down to then start to rebuild. So we're still working with a lot of our clients on doing culture audits. So assessing culture, we can do all of that remotely. It's a process of looking at what has existed in the past, what are the behaviours, the unwritten ground rules, the things that have actually held people back from performing well. Most of the time, employees know this. They've been living this. They understand it. They know what the problems are. They most probably have the solutions already. So it's about engaging with those clients, first of all, to assess what has been the culture. And then when we start to look at what is the strategy moving forward, what is the opportunity for pivot or growth or change right now that we need to help develop the culture of the business to support. And so we do strategy facilitation workshops with leaders. We help them really unpack what does that need to look like, and then how do we design the culture, upskill the employees, relook at capability and capacity of the organisation to deliver, and how do we support them to change it. So it's actually an ideal time, because you aren't restricted by business as usual. You aren't restricted by those unwritten ground rules or behaviours, and you've got an opportunity to revisit strategy and to implement change.
Yeah, perfect. And just this might be putting you on the spot a little, but I was just thinking as you were talking about this, and just from your experience and clients you've been speaking to, have you encountered anyone that's currently demonstrating it really well and kind of leading from the front in terms of that culture piece, where they've kind of gone, okay, this is a situation we're in, be as small as, I don't know, maybe on a communication front or initiatives that people are taking? Is there anything that you've personally come across over this last sort of couple of months, I guess, that everyone on this call could potentially consider for their own, or implementing in their own businesses, or into the future?
Yeah, look, there's a couple of things, and I won't mention organisations by name, obviously, but I have one client in the performing arts industry, and they have, when this first happened, everything they cancelled performances up, through till October, so their whole year of revenue earning, of wardrobe teams and production teams and lighting and technical, it's gone. The work's gone, and they are actually transitioning really well by looking at how they actually continue to keep people engaged, by identifying problems. So what have been the things that we haven't been able to get to because we've always been so focused on delivering an outcome? We've got to deliver a performance. And so they're now going, well, these are all the roadblocks. These are things that we didn't really get to. How can we actually resolve a lot of those problems and templates? How can we actually get teams of people working together that they didn't work together before, share information and knowledge? How do we capture a lot of that data that's been held? So they've gone back to their purpose and their vision for the future to guide their activity now, and try and keep all of those people employed and engaged. And there's another organisation that I'm working with at the moment, which is a large community organisation. They've got 6,000 members Queensland-wide, and we're working with the leaders. We've just done a culture audit. We know where some of the key problems are and the things that are preventing them delivering on their mission, where that exists, and they're focusing on development. So there's different ways organisations are doing that. And I just I'll share a story of something that I did, not as part of this crisis, but a while ago, that could be an idea that some of you might be able to take with you as looking at the types of projects people can do. So 4 or 5 years ago, I was the HR director for Nikon Australia, and we had a geographically dispersed workforce. And part of the key objectives for us was improving communication, improving understanding of different business functions, and actually engaging our employees in understanding business costs and business efficiency. And so we formed developed a program which is called Outside the Yellow Square. So if you know Nikon logo is a yellow square. So it was like, let's start getting everyone to think outside the yellow square. And we I split everyone into geographically and functionally diverse teams. We had about 8 teams across the whole organisation. And the first task was they had to, as a team, pick up the telephone and actually have a team meeting. So no matter where they were, they had to introduce each other, themselves to each other, and find out what they did and who they were. And the first task was as simple as come up with an idea for the Christmas party. So just talk. And every month we had a different team challenge for these different teams, leading up to the last one being a cost reduction project. So in your team, identify a problem that existed in the business or exists in the business, and then spend a certain allocated number of hours every week to solve the problem, to come up with an idea, and then someone from that team would present it to the leadership group. And the person who presented to the leadership group could not be a leader or a supervisor or a manager. It had to be someone else. So we were encouraging everyone to develop their skills and their abilities to understand the business, to problem solve, and to work on the problems that they could identify are the ones that were holding them back anyway. And one of the most memorable things was when we were in the leadership team meeting, and our receptionist, who's just this beautiful tiny little lady, stood up and gave a presentation about how to reconfigure the packaging, or the placement of packaging on pallets, and the estimated cost saving when we're looking at distribution into our large distribution partners like JB Hi-Fi was estimated at $300,000 a year. And I'm just like, wow. The fact that we had these problems being solved by people, they were communicating, they were understanding, they were engaged, they were adding value. So I use that just as an example, as this can be an ideal time. If people can't be doing what they normally would be doing, they can still be adding value. They can still be working and communicating and understanding the business differently. They can be maintaining a sense of connection to your business. And I think that's really important, maintaining that sense of connection and ability to feel valued. And I was talking to another friend a little while ago who works for Qantas and who's been stood down as a part of this these changes. And the way that that's been handled and the way that it's been done by Qantas has been so valued by her. She feels really important still. She still has a strong connection to Qantas. And so there's no question in her mind that when Qantas need to ramp up again, she will come back and come back to Qantas. And I think this is where the strength and the value of culture is really important too. For the people that you've had to stand down or make the tough decisions around their employment and their future with the business, when you need to ramp up, and you may need to ask, pull those people back or re-engage people, how willing are they going to be to do that? And I think that's a question a lot of businesses need to be asking themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more on that because, yeah, especially I think, the way in which people exit the business is that will remain with them. And that's the biggest thing that we are hearing definitely amongst the market anyway. Danita actually asked a really good question, which I just thought we might jump into it now.
Sure.
She's asked if any of your clients have provided any feedback on how they are approaching these tough conversations around whether it's reducing hours, taking leave, potentially being stood down. Do you have any examples at the moment?
We've been supporting quite a number of our clients with this information and helping them prepare on what that looks like. And the way to have the conversations is to again be honest, provide some clarity. So it's not about this is what we don't know. It's about this is what we know right now. So if a decision is about reducing hours, it is we know right now that our business is being impacted by this coronavirus. And the reality is that we are going to have to reduce some hours. So we want to work with you. And so it's about really having a conversation that's honest. It's still future focused. So it is our plan that this will happen in the future, that we'll be able to come back. It's about understanding people's personal circumstances as well, and having that conversation around what the reality is for the business and what the reality is for the employee. Now, you're not always going to be able to get an ideal match or an agreement. If you can get an agreement for what that looks like, then that's much better. But sometimes you are going to have that tough conversation. So someone I was talking with earlier this week, the decision was made that for all managers would take a 20% pay cut, but they would take a day off a week. So they were not expected to work one day a week, or they could take their annual leave or long service leave on those days to maintain their pay. So there's a lot of different ways that you can approach these conversations. My advice would be to understand firstly what is the employment conditions or legislative requirements that relate, whether you're bound by certain consultation requirements under awards or employment contracts or EBAs. So understand what your boundaries are, what you can and can't do. But most awards and industrial instruments say that you can actually come to a negotiated agreement. I would be always saying have things in writing so that you don't have any dispute on what was agreed going through this process. But the conversation, Danita, needs to be honest. It needs to be with empathy and care, and it needs to be providing clarity. So you need to be clear on what those outcomes are, how long that's going to be in place for, when it's going to be reviewed, so that what employees need at this time when they've got high anxiety is some clarity about what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess now if we're moving into that kind of innovation piece, we've obviously seen some businesses already change the direction to take advantage of new opportunities. So, distilleries, for example, are now producing hand sanitizer, and manufacturers are shifting to producing and delivering masks. It's obviously not possible for all businesses, but how should companies prepare for the future?
I think we work, so at Henry Reid, we've developed a model for organisational effectiveness, and I'll just explain that quickly first, because I think if businesses come back to that and are able to work with that makes a little bit more sense. So our model for organisational effectiveness is how we explain the impact of culture to CEOs who normally roll their eyes when I start to talk about culture and those other things. The centre of the model is what I call the heart of the organisational effective. It's purpose, vision, and value. So your purpose, obviously, is why you exist, and your vision is your aspirational view for your future, and your values drive your behaviours. Fairly standard culture elements. The next layer to that, and what sits around that, is a hard framework of strategy, governance, and risk. And that's where your CEOs and execs, your business owners, directors, that's where they like to play. They get that stuff. It's the strategy needs to align to the vision for the future and be able to achieve the purpose. Governance are your systems and processes and policies that are actually going to help guide you to delivering that vision, and the risk element needs to be understood, because you've always got to look at those mitigating risk, and majority of risk comes from within an organisation. So it's understanding what are the values and behaviours that define your culture that are actually going to impact your risk for your business.
Yeah.
The third element or layer to that model is the environment that's created, and that's highly influenced by leaders. And for me, there's 6 elements of that. It's clarity, communication. We've spoken about both of those a few times today. Care and community, and consistency, and commitment. And all of those things, when you start to look at how you align from your purpose, vision, and values to your strategy, governance, and risk, to the environment that's created and the way leaders role model and behave in the business and encourage employees to interact, it leads to the impact of culture, which is that final layer, which is around alignment and accountability and engagement. And when you have all of those things aligned and working well together, you can actually make incredible change and difference to the business when those things are happening. So right now, businesses, I would be saying, certainly they're going to be reviewing their strategy, their governance, and their risk, because that's a really good tangible things to look at. They need to be doing that aligned with culture as well, because more than 70% of change fails because culture doesn't support the change. And so this is an idea. We're in a change environment now. We've got massive change that's been thrust upon us. And so it's the ideal time to making sure, are the changes that are being put in place now going to be sustainable? Are they actually going to be successful and the right changes that are going to take the business forward? When you're looking at changing strategy, changing from brewing gin to brewing hand sanitizer, or from making medical equipment and devices to face masks, or whatever the change is, how sustainable is that? Everyone reacts. We have a good reaction ability. We've reacted. Everyone's moved to working from home. But how sustainable is it in engaging and aligning and having employees being accountable in the long term? So for me, it's about leaders of businesses. If they're looking at changing direction or taking advantage of these opportunities, they can't just be looking at strategy in isolation. They've got to be looking at the impact of employees and leaders, that alignment and the way, the environment they're creating, even though people might be in a remote environment, and how that all aligns to deliver a sustainable result or prepare them for a future change.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I might be putting you on the spot, but
it's okay.
just as you were talking, and obviously the gin distilleries moving to hand sanitizers, have you personally at all come across any of, whether it's your clients or heard through clients, businesses that are pivoting and taking advantage in the best way possible, obviously, of new opportunities to differentiate themselves and think outside the box, obviously continuing with their original service offering, but then, you know, looking at what else they could be doing in order to keep growing their business.
Well, we have one client who is a manufacturer in the complementary health food health sector, so not health food, complementary health sector, and their business has changed over the last month. They're actually busier now than they have been in an April-May period for a couple of years, and the reason their business has changed and pivoted because there is such a demand for nutritional products, immunity boosting product, which they are completely set up to manufacture, but it's a shift from their normal. They had actually identified this as a market that they wanted to get into more, and through conversations, it's already shown that this market for them provides a greater advantage to the community. It's actually a higher profit, better margin product for them to be manufacturing. And so, and also they have the advantage of some of the ingredients that they used to get from China, they can't get from China. And so now they're actually sourcing them locally. They are now 100% Australian ingredients, Australian manufactured, and that's a really great opportunity for them when they're looking at, in this time, the change to, rather than a cheap product, a quality product that's going to have a positive impact. So that's one of our clients we're working with who's actively looking at the demand in the market and making some changes. Not as dramatic as changing your whole production lines from gin to hand sanitizer, but look, it's certainly impacting all sorts of businesses, and there are opportunities out there that businesses need to be looking at taking advantage of.
Yeah, absolutely. And just in the chats, I know some of the 8 Mile guys and Julie's just mentioned, you know, it really has been heartwarming to see how many for free or digital tools are now available to everybody to support the community and obviously the government as well. So yeah.
And look, I think that's one of the most amazing things that's going to come out of this. I'm really optimistic for the future. Because this is happening globally, it's happening across the whole world, things will fundamentally shift. This is a fundamental shift in humanity. We are going to be seeing, and I think we already are, if we're on Facebook or we're part of things, we're seeing on LinkedIn, we're seeing all these companies offering not only technology for free, development programs for free, consulting for free, support, reaching out. We're connecting more, whether it's we've got more time now, we're not so absorbed with our own lives, we're actually reaching out and connecting and having more conversations. But it also has broken down a lot of barriers. So I think barriers that we've seen in the past where, and I'm just going to flick back to recruitment for one, where we've thought, okay, this is our business and we work in this geographical region. So if I'm going to hire people, I'm going to hire people from this geographical region. We now see that that's actually not a requirement. We can hire the best people for our business from anywhere in the world because they can work from anywhere in the world because we're doing that now with online. Yeah. So I think we're going to see the breaking down of a lot of barriers. We're going to see a change in focus from being, I think, so materialistic and maybe focused on self to a greater sense of community and achievement. I think it's for everyone, it's a great leveler, and I think it's a great opportunity, and I think it's going to actually be better for all of us. We've seen the environment start to recover. We've seen so many positives that are coming through, and such generosity coming from businesses and from the government. And there's a whole lot of things I hope will continue that we don't just flip back into this is the way we used to do things. This is the opportunity for everyone to make change.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I was just having a conversation with a colleague of mine the other day around that whole, you know, people are now able to tap into, you know, it doesn't need to be someone from Brisbane. They could be in Sydney, they could be in Melbourne. And, you know, having that ability now, because we are all forced to work remotely, for example, there's nothing stopping us now from connecting people and organisations from across the country and internationally as well.
That's exactly right, because most businesses, and certainly we've shifted. We can do all of the offerings that we used to do face to face, we can do them online. We're doing online focus groups where we've got people entering information and going into breakout rooms and coming up with ideas and sharing and creating word clouds. And we don't need to be face to face to do those types of activities. So I think this has changed mindsets. It's broken down some barriers that prevented some leaders in wanting to accept flexibility, and it's shown everyone what's possible. So it is possible. It is possible to implement change. It is possible to work flexibly, and it is possible to do things differently, not the way we've always done them.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Well, look, I think that leads nicely. I mean, we've obviously been asking a few questions as the session's gone on. Is there anyone though, and feel free now, you don't have to type it in, you can unmute yourself. It's just down in the left-hand corner. Is there anyone with any sort of final questions or thoughts that they'd like to add? Feel free to unmute yourself and share them or ask the questions. May not. There we go. Is there?
I think that's it. Everyone's quiet.
Oh, I thought I heard someone coming through. That's okay.
I've got a question actually. Can you hear me?
Oh, Helen, yes, we can.
Hi, Helen.
Hello.
Hey, how are you doing?
Yeah, good.
Quick question. I've been speaking to some HR professionals, friends of mine, and what they're noticing as well is the need and the awareness around mental health of employees. And I was wondering, Georgia, with with your experience, and also Anna, you've spoken to so many employers as well. What are they doing in this area? Is there a more raised awareness now that this is going on, and also the fact that parents have to now juggle homeschooling and work?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering whether there's anything creative coming out of that in terms of, how employers are supporting their employees.
I haven't seen a lot of creativity coming out in that space yet. I've seen a lot of awareness of the need for employee assistance programs and reliance on communicating out employee assistance programs and the availability of support. I think leaders are becoming more aware that they actually have to lead differently and that they have to care. Now more than ever, emotional intelligence skills of leaders and those soft skills of leaders are important, and it's lacking. I think it's showing what's lacking in a lot of leadership across organisations, rather than seeing good things or creativity. I think for HR leaders, it's a time it's a really tough time. It's a time of incredible change. They're the ones who've had to be leading a lot of these tough discussions and having implementing the difficult changes with leaders who particularly, or potentially may not be flexible, may not be have these soft skills to be able to be aware of what their teams need, may not be able to communicate effectively. And so there's a lot of work, as I said, a lot of my work over the last couple of weeks has been one-on-one executive coaching, talking leaders through how are you doing this? What is the support that you need right now? What are the challenges you're facing? And just helping them have the tools to help them support their teams and their employees. Some of them aren't even aware that they need to be focused on their employee well-being and care. So I think HR leaders have an incredibly tough time in some organisations where if the culture of having those elements of care and community weren't strong, they're going to struggle, and I think employee well-being is going to be unfortunately the cost of a lot of this. But again, it comes back to what I keep advising people to do is communicate with clarity about what you know. So understand that we don't know everything. That's okay. Don't say to people, oh, well, we really don't know. We've got no idea. We have to wait and see, because what people need is some certainty about what we do know. What we do know right now is, X, Y, and Z, and I'll update you and I'll come back to you and I'll let you know when that changes. It's about helping people to continue to add value and feel like they're contributing and engaged with the business. And it's about having some empathy for everyone's understanding. So everyone's positions and what's happening. Leaders need to be asking the questions. How are you right now? What is it that you need? And are you able to, what are you able to deliver from home? Because people are homeschooling, people have got challenges, people can't attend a regular meeting every day. So just check in and ask those questions. I think it's going to be, well-being and mental health is going to be a real challenge ongoing.
Yeah, and I agree with Georgia there. I haven't seen or had conversations of too many huge examples as yet. I guess from the conversations and what I've personally experienced as well, has more been around morale and building that, whether that's, you know, through morning meetings and, you know, playing some activities or games to try and get the day started and connected with your team, to like a Friday afternoon virtual wine and beer, and still trying to keep that sort of sense of normality, but in a bit of a different way. So not groundbreaking kind of stuff from what I've seen just yet, and I'm sure that's probably going to change over time. But you know, just those small things to start, I think are really
and I think it's really important. Get your teams to come up with the ideas. Leaders don't need to have all the ideas. Your teams know what they want and how they can do things, how they can share. There's lots of, I've spoken to lots of different people. We've got dance challenges and exercise challenges. They've got fancy dress Friday, or teams. I was speaking to one leader the other day who was like, I really don't know how to, you know, I'm telling my team I have a meeting at this time every day and I'm telling them what they need to do for the day. And I said, why are you telling them? They know what to do. Focus on the outcomes. Get someone different to host the meeting every day. You can still have that daily check-in. Get them to host it and get them to theme it. Get them to say, okay, tomorrow's going to be a yellow day, or tomorrow's joke day. Come with a joke. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It lightens it. It connects. It shows some care and empathy and understanding, and it gives some people something to look forward to. So if you know that it's Fancy Dress Friday, or it's a themed meeting, or a planking challenge, or whatever it is going to be, it's not, you know, it's still having a sense of connection and fun and community. Yeah, there's you know, unlimited things that you can do.
Yeah, 100%. Wonderful. Well, look, I'm conscious it has just hit 1 o'clock, and you know, we're really grateful. Georgia, do you have any sort of final words that you're going to say?
Look, I think as some key takeaways. Business needs to continue to function, not hibernate. There's so much we can do. We need to be focusing on preparing for the future. Culture is going to be the key to effective change and sustainable change. So if you haven't been looking at culture, or if it's a problem, or it's a roadblock or a challenge, then this is the ideal time. Things have been broken. We can now rebuild the way we want to. So now is the time for change. We've gone through our reaction phase. We're settling into a new normal. And so this is the time to keep that disruption going and build for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I guess finally, thank you all so much for taking the time to join us. You know, we both do hope that you took some value away from this. We'll definitely follow up with you all, just with, you know, I'll speak with Georgia. We'll pull together some of these key takeaways for you. Georgia will share her contact details with you, but feel free to reach out to either of us, and you know, if everybody's happy, we can share people's details here so everyone can be connected. But yeah, look, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you, Georgia, once again.
Pleasure.
It's been awesome. But look, everyone, take care, stay happy, healthy and well, and we'll talk to you all soon.
And have a very happy Easter, everyone. I can't believe it's that time of the year again.
I know. Perfect. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.